Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Dima Ayash, and I am the head of communications for this year's German-American conference. And I am delighted to welcome you all to our event today on the role of AI in education. Our theme this year is Neustart, or overhaul in English. And as the world grapples with doing things differently this year, we decided to forego our traditional 3-day conference for a virtual event series throughout the fall, where we have explored the Neustart theme across a wide variety of topics. As some of you know, this is our final week of events. We have been really humbled by the support and encouragement that we have received from you all in the last few months, and we have been really delighted to put together this event series at a challenging time for everyone. The event series would not be possible without the generous support of Wunderbar Together, Germany and the US, and the work of our exceptional team in event planning, communications, and digital logistics. Before we begin, I wanted to remind you that today's event has 2 components. First will be a panel discussion right here in Zoom, and you can submit questions to our speakers using the Zoom Q&A function. After that, we will migrate over to the Sophia space for a more interactive session where you will get to mingle with the speakers and the other attendees. We will share the link to the Sophia space in the Zoom chat towards the end of the panel discussion, so keep an eye out for that. The Sophia space is best accessed through Google Chrome, if you can get that going for the event. And in everything that you share with us today, please adhere to our code of conduct. With that, I will hand it over to my colleague Cecile to get the event started.
Thank you for this brilliant introduction, Dima. Welcome, everyone, to today's panel discussion on the role of artificial intelligence in education, entitled Frenemy: Can AI Replace Your Professor? My name is Cecile Meyer-Scherling, and I'm a member of the organizing committee. The current pandemic has catalyzed digital advances in education and raises the question as to how the future of education will look like. At the same time, AI has already changed our lives in many ways. This prompted us to ask the question whether AI will only be used as a tool to fill educational gaps, or ultimately, if it could replace professors entirely. To discuss this question with us today, I am delighted to welcome Daniela Kolbe, Daniel Schwarz, and Dr. Vishal Punwani, as well as our award-winning moderator, Eva Wolfangel. Eva was Knight Science Journalism Fellow at MIT in 2019-2020, and was awarded the European Science Writer Award in 2018. In her investigative work, she focuses on science reporting, future technologies, and their significance for society. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Eva. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome from my side as well. It's great to have you all with us, and we really will be having a great and very interesting and important discussion as well about the future of learning and how AI can help us with that. I would like to introduce the speakers, who will give a very short elevator pitch, 2 minutes each speaker, about their main ideas and topics around this topic. And then we'll have a panel discussion, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A where you can ask your questions. So already maybe think about, if you have questions which you want to ask, put them in the Q&A box, and we will discuss them later as much as time as we have on them. So the first speaker is Daniel Schwarz. He is the Dean of Stanford Graduate School of Education. And he did a lot of research about how technology can facilitate learning. And he has, by the way, the perfect background, because he says improving life through learning. So we see how important that is. And we will find out if technology, and especially AI, can help with that. And among many other successes, Daniel has been named Graduate School Education Teacher of the Year. So that means we might maybe don't want to replace him with an AI. And that's what he told me before we met here, that he thinks this is not the right way. But let's ask him. Daniel, please, welcome.
Thank you, Eva. So can a computer replace your professor? If it's a bad professor, probably. You could probably do a good job of replacing your bad professor. In general, it's going to take some of the functions that teachers do, and you'll be able to automate them. But I actually think the action's more on how it's going to augment teaching. So I think about third grade teachers. You probably don't replace them. So how could you augment? There's things going on that suggest a really different path that's really relying on AI's ability to handle very complex sensory data. So let me just give a couple of examples quickly. So at Stanford, there's a project that is using Google Glass, and they've created a lightweight AI program that can be on the cell phone. And what the glass can do is it can tell the emotions of the speaker that you're interacting with. So this is being now used with children who are on the autism spectrum, so that they're talking to people and the glass can alert them to the emotions that that person is feeling. And it can orient them to look at that person's eyes, which is something that doesn't happen very much. So here's an example of AI really augmenting rather than replacing. Another quick example would be, it's possible to put a cell phone in your classroom. And at the end of the day, you look at your cell phone and it tells you how much you talked compared to how much your students talked, right? And so AI tends to chase where the data are. And right now, the data are sitting in thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of videotapes. The data that's coming out of computerized systems for teaching is really somewhat too customized to those systems. So it'll help optimize the system, but it won't teach us how to teach well. It'll just make that system better at doing whatever it does. So it will augment, it will not replace. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was even less than 2 minutes. You will have some time saved for later. That's great for our discussion. Thank you so much. The next speaker is Vish Punwani. He's the CEO of Sophya.ai. So he is the one we will meet in his room. We will be meeting later today. He is a Harvard Innovation Lab alumnus, and he's a medical doctor by training. And he as well was named one of the highest, or he was one of the highest rated teaching fellows at Khan Academy. So again, I guess we don't want to replace him either. So welcome, Vish. So what's your vision? What can AI help us with education?
Thanks, Eva. And Daniel, I love that company. I think you're talking about Brain Power with Ned. Maybe they're great. I completely agree with Daniel, actually. Replacing the professor is probably not a good idea. I think if you separate out what being a professor means, there's one part which is like imparting information to the next generation or whoever it is that you're teaching, and that part, could potentially be offloaded to a machine in some respects. But there's a lot of nuance to teaching, which is very social. The only reason I think that I became the highest rated teaching fellow at Khan Academy was because I make really stupid jokes all the time. And I'm not even a dad yet, so I'm not sure how that happened. But the point is that robots are really bad at jokes, and robots are not the best at sort of all of the different social nuances that we've all evolved to exhibit really, really well. And at the end of the day, again, learning is a very social experience. It doesn't happen very well in isolation. And so absolutely agree, augmenting the teaching experience by offloading what we shouldn't be dealing with our very valuable brains, and allowing us more time and freedom to double down on the things that make us very valuable to each other. That's the way that I think probably all three of us will agree things should go and will probably go.
Since you as well saved some time, one short question, you said things we shouldn't be doing, but what kind of things should that be, for example?
Sure. So, and this cuts across both my medical work as well as my teaching work. There's always a very conserved, I guess, power curve of tasks, information, sets of lessons that I continually have to pass on time after time to every new group of students that come my way, or new interns or young doctors or whatever. And the rote work involved in continually passing on that information, teaching the same thing over and over again. Not that it's not interesting, but that's not why I'm here. Like, the real reason my students and my sort of young doctors that are attached to me want to talk to me is because of the nuance that comes with sort of the higher level experiences that I've had, not because of things they could learn from a textbook.
Great, thank you so much. This was wonderful. And then we have Daniela Kolbe. She is a social democratic member of the German parliament, and she is a chairwoman of the study committee on AI. And this committee reflects on the benefits and risks of this disruptive technology. So I think it's really great to have her here and to hear her standpoint on the question, can AI replace the professor, or what else can AI help us with? Welcome, Daniela.
Hello, everybody. Also from my side, well, I'm just a politician, so my ability to look into the future is quite limited. But we live in times that are changing so quickly that I would say, let's never say never. So we don't know what will be in 10 or 20 years. But we reflecting on our times nowadays, I would say we see that on some in some areas, AI is already replacing educators. If I think about myself, I really like learning languages by using apps because it's very comfortable. I can do it sitting in the train or on my sofa, and the threshold is very low, so I don't have to meet any people that I don't know. I don't have to meet a teacher that is giving me a feedback what I probably maybe don't want. So in that area, I think AI will replace educators, and it's okay. But I also agree with Daniel and Vishal that, of course, education, thinking about universities and schools, and also professional training, is about social interaction. We all feel it nowadays, that we feel lonely very quickly, although we met hundreds of people via Zoom. It's only a small percentage of the room around me, so it lacks a lot of social interaction. And I think that education needs classmates and needs good teachers. And from a very German point of view, we should also be very careful looking at data protection and so on. I think that AI is a mighty assistant for teachers and should be a mighty assistant. But if I look at AI systems that just measure the temperature of kids' noses and then tells teachers whether they are attentive or not, I think, well, let's be very careful. Let's do some research on it. Let's reflect on discrimination of kids from social or lower income families, because the system behind the nose is very complex. It's a human being, and it could be my daughter. So we need a lot of discussion what AI in education can and should do, and also reflect on data security and the right of a person to also hide emotions and so on.
Thank you so much, Daniela. That was really interesting. And I think we have many things to discuss around that as well. I would like to start the panel discussion going back to Daniel. You told us about that Google Class that can tell emotions of people. And the other system that help you to assess if you talk too much or not enough, maybe. And I wonder if you could collect, or if you work on projects where you could collect more information and maybe find out if people understand the exercise they should do, if things like that. Maybe give us some more information about your projects.
Yeah, so that one of the things that's hard for teachers is to collect process data about students. So imagine you have a classroom of kids who are doing some sort of scientific inquiry, or grown-ups, and It's very hard for the teacher to know how they're going about what they're doing. Are they making good experiments, let's say? So the teacher might walk around the room and go talk to one group to find out, but when the teacher's looking at one group, the teacher's missing the information from all the other groups. So that's kind of a hard problem. It's one where AI is turning out to be pretty good, where you give students open-ended tasks and we can track how they're going about doing their inquiry and provide that information to teachers. Now, a question I always have is the information too subtle, right? Are we measuring something that's so small and delicate and then asking the teacher to work on it? Maybe that's a mistake. But in the meantime, I think one of the places is, temporal sequences for the AI to be able to capture that and sort of see how people are going about complicated tasks and see, are they going down dead ends? So that might be an application.
And you would take the data from apps they are working on, or from, or where do those data come from?
Yeah, in my lab, we actually design apps that are meant to enable us to detect good signal. So they have like little science inquiry tasks. And as they click around the screen, we track the clicks and we can figure out how they're trying to solve the problem. And we can recognize when they're doing things like trial and error or just trying to get done is a very typical behavior as opposed to trying to understand. And so we can pick that up. So this is one of the things AI is going to be good at, is sort of making sense of very complicated data. Yeah. But thus far, our experience is you have to design the system for that kind of collection. You can't, most people are just taking data that's been collected from large systems and trying to analyze it after the fact. And that's not working so well.
That means you find out if people understood it, or if they do try and errors, that means that they haven't understood it. And then you give them the same or a similar exercise again, or what's
right? So you would be a very good experimental psychologist. That's exactly what you would do. But we build in things. Our basic question is: are we preparing students to learn when there's nobody there to tell them what to do? And so we really look at the strategies they use to solve kinds of problems, and then, to make it compelling, we then give them a new problem and show that they learn how to solve that on their own without any support.
So that would be good news for homeschooling as well, right? That kids can do that independently of their parents, and independently if the parents have time or capacity to teach them.
Right. Yeah. In the era of COVID, I think people have discovered how hard it is to have a child who's not an independent learner.
Yeah. And we found out that most of the kids are not able to learn for themselves, right? It looks like they missed how to learn. They missed learn how to learn it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that for the younger kids or kids with special needs, that's a big problem. For high school students, the big problem is they think it's all homework. They don't realize it's actually class, and so they sort of they don't want to do it. But that's a different. That's
motivation. Motivation is another big topic. Yeah.
Stubborn learner as opposed to independent learner. So.
Yeah. That's a good keyword for which, because you told me that you have another project where you try to find out strategies of successful learners. Tell us a bit about this. How are you doing that?
Yeah. So basically, I feel like my life got better when I realized that everything is about statistics and everything is a data problem. And once you have a system to collect enough data, you can pretty much ask and answer any type of question. And then whatever the answer is, you can interrogate it from lots of different angles to make sure that what you're getting back is real or isn't real. And so what we sort of did was we said, through my travels at Khan Academy and then at the WHO, my co-founder and we realized that, what education really has is a data problem. Like there's lots of fantastic teachers, there's lots of fantastic institutions and all this stuff, but a lot of the lessons that we could generalize with are being missed out on because there's not sort of robust systems of data collection that exist within education. And there's lots of reasons for that. There's like privacy and data things, and there's like red tape and sort of slow moving, the way that we think about educational institutions with our cynic hat on. All of those things sort of hamper the ability for education to do what the business world has done really, really well, or the medical world with lots and lots of data collection. And using that to then inform what could be good for many people. And so what we did at Sophia with one of our softwares, Sophia Learn, which is separate to the one that we're going to go into later, is we said, hey, you know that thing that Pinterest did and Spotify did, where they essentially like gave, if you guys, I'm just going to take a step back. If you think about what music was like before Spotify, I'm sure this is something everybody here can empathize with. Basically what happened was we would all have to go on YouTube and then like illegally rip or download songs and then organize them in a folder on our computer and then put it on our phones and then like rename them so the names weren't all janky, because that would just annoy us. And then like 2 weeks later, we'd get annoyed because all of our music we're sick of, and then we'd go on YouTube and do that whole thing over again. It was like the worst experience. And what Spotify did was they were like, we're going to give everybody all the music, and we're just going to like sit back and like look at how people are interacting with music. And we're going to attach little probes to everything and sort of analyze and collect data and build clusters and see who fits into which box, so that anytime a subsequent listener jumps onto Spotify, we can eventually ask them a series of qualifying questions, figure out like where any given learner is or listener is in our cluster, and then sort of fine tune their position within a cluster to give them exactly what they want next, probably. And so we said, you know, the only reason music was able to do that, the only reason Amazon and Spotify and Google and Facebook are able to do things like this is because they're really pushing the envelope on data collection and analysis. And education can really do this. Education can do this. And so it's literally the same problem. And so what we did was, except instead of songs, it's educational resources. Instead of like a recommendation engine, it is a recommendation engine, but maybe there's like an agent there that can find where students are in their learning and help guide them, right? If they're those stubborn learners, help guide them to where they need to go toward a successful outcome. And so what we did was we built a system where student learning behavior, whether that's, you know, simple, silly things like time on platform, resources being looked at, all of those sort of silly, easy things, combined with all the difficult things, like what are all of the micro evaluations telling us? What is the student's learning background? What are the patterns of learning that they're doing? What resources are they using and what are they not using? Critically, what is it outside of our curriculum that they're using? Because I think we all know that students don't come to school to use 100% of the materials at the school. Literally every student is like, okay, cool, I'm hearing these keywords in class, and now I'm going to go on the internet and Google that. And like, sure, I got a PDF from my teacher, but maybe I'll look at that last. And so the important thing is like, what are the things on the internet that they're looking at, which is going to inform so much of what their outcome is at the end of the year. And so we essentially built a system to look at all that data. And now we're, you know, getting close to month 11 of data collection and analysis. And we're seeing some interesting patterns.
But that means in the end, you will find the most or the best learning materials on the internet? So or is there more about learning strategies you find out?
Yeah, it's complex. So part of it is learning material, sure. A lot of it is patterns of learning. And then it's also important to recognize that this is a very narrow subset of students. This is like STEM, health science. We're primarily focused in medical school area. So it's not at all generalizable yet. And then the last thing I'll say is that because we have 11 months of thousands and thousands of students learning data, we are getting final grades back over the next month or so from these institutions, which we can then sort of also plug into our statistical analyses to look at how does this validate or invalidate some of these learning pathways that students have taken. And again, this isn't something you can do if you have like 10 students because the power isn't there, right? This is something that takes, again, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, millions actually of data points.
Yeah, that's the general problem with AI, or challenge at least. But as you said, education, in the end, there should be enough data points. We just have to start or to make use of them, right? Mm-hmm. And Daniela, I guess that's maybe a good keyword for you, making use of data, because you already said it. Maybe typical German fear is data protection. So what is your point of view of these ideas? Is there something we can do to make sure the data stays privacy? Is there things we shouldn't do at all for data we shouldn't use at all?
Well, actually, first of all, I'm really fascinated what is possible and what is going on in the area. And I think that AI should be used in education process. And the German point of view is also that we are not the country that is the first country in digitalization of education. So we have also another problem, really a lot of problems concerning bringing schools to the internet, and the challenge of homeschooling and teachers that are not able to write emails and so on. So it's we have a lot to do in Germany, but of course we have to put a lot of energy also in this area of AI. And it's, of course, it's about data, and I think it's okay to collect data, but we, as I said, should also discuss as a society what data should be collected, what pupils, what students should, well, own, which data should not be collected, because it says something about their health status, or about their social background, because of behavior, or their feelings. So I'm feeling very uncomfortable with the idea of like scoring students with AI systems, and so we should discuss about what we are able to do. Of course, very fascinating, and we should give power to that, but we should also discuss what we don't want to with AI. Well, yes.
That's interesting, because you said it's a typical German challenge to digitization and education in schools. And funnily, I had the experience that I was with my kids in the US for the last year, and so we had some homeschooling there as well. And of course, it was much easier to get all those apps. They have much more apps you could use. Everybody had laptops. Many kids even got a laptop from school and could. So this was easy compared to Germany, what I experience now. But on the other side, it was still very challenging to motivate the kids to learn at home. And this is a question to all three of you, maybe. Is AI maybe able to help us with motivation for learning as well? Do you have any ideas, experiences, or projects around that?
I mean, the most important thing for a learner, from my perspective at least, is how do we keep people in the zone of proximal learning, right? So how do you make sure that students don't feel discouraged because they feel like the perception is like what they're trying to learn is way too advanced for them, which, by the way, is the case like much of the time, especially if you're learning programming, Jesus. But or this is way too easy, right? And so how do you keep like the carrot right in front of the students so that they're like, okay, cool, I can do this, I can reach the carrot. And you know, that in itself is like intrinsically engaging to students. And so I think, you know, from an AI perspective, being able to figure out where that is for any given student, because it's so personal. You can't get personalized learning without data. And so that's why I think that that engagement problem is wildly solved with an engaging system, interfaces, things that students like that are sort of in keeping with the other technologies that they view on a daily basis. Like it's hard for a student to go from Snapchat 1 second or like Among Us or, you know, whatever other apps are really popular right now to like typewriting at school. It's like a little ridiculous. So meeting them where they are is important. And then the second thing is, okay, well, from a pedagogical perspective, how do you always keep them in that important zone where they're feeling the intrinsic motivation as well?
So here's a,
Daniel, yeah.
so here's a different ethical dilemma besides questions of privacy. So there are companies that are very good at providing you rewards when you do certain things. And so they might give you points, or they might give you virtual land, or they might give you costumes. And what they do is they keep testing to see which of these is the most motivating to you. So it's very much like what casinos do. And the AI figures out this person will be the most motivated by this particular reward. So I could do this in school. I could sit there and continue to, it's called a multi-armed bandit. I could try lots of different approaches and see what works for that kid to keep them engaged. It feels a little unethical to me to be basically driving the kid to be motivated when they're not aware that I'm manipulating them. But it is a place where I think AI could do something about motivation.
But you say we shouldn't do that? So is it clearly unethical from your perspective?
Well, I need smarter people than me to help me reason through. But my gut response is maybe once or twice, but boy, if you do that 100,000 times with that kid, it feels kind of wrong. But I don't know the dimensions for doing that ethical discussion.
And I think you can imagine what people could do with those data if they could access it, right? Whoever, everything we know about data is if they are interesting enough, people will be able to hack them and to make use of them in a bad way. And I think this is maybe the biggest danger with this idea.
Right. Somebody will learn that I am completely motivated by $1 Frosty Freeze ice cream cones. And they'll be able to manipulate me for the rest of my life by putting out ice cream cones.
That sounds like something we don't want to do.
First of all,
I see you want to add
you.
something.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I don't blame you. Those are delicious. The other thing is that like it's so interesting because everything, all of these things should be seen through a lens of like, of course we want to get to the promised land where like we're like full equity, everybody has equal opportunity, of course. And then not on the other hand, but another consideration is like, well, where are we today? And what are we comparing our potential interventions to? Like, if you think about job search, like people are motivated by different pieces of equity. People are motivated by different like positions of power or influence or money or whatever it happens to be. And so, I don't know if it's that different. And I don't know if any of it is like broadly ethical. And so I think it's just part of a giant question. It's like, are carrots, if the person doesn't know, are carrots unethical? And it is possible.
May I ask a question, Eva?
Yeah, please.
Because
welcome.
My feeling is that AI systems concerning to education think about education as a linear process. So I'm getting better and better and better and better. But actually, I feel that education is very unlinear. So I often need a break, or I'm doing something different, or just trying, nothing works, no success. And after all of that, well, it makes I have a wow effect, and I understand, and I got it. So how can I help on that? So is there?
That's really cool, because this really fits neatly to my next question, would be around, should we use brain data, for example? Because I think if you would use brain data, we could find out, oh, this person needs a break, or this is he or she is in a very good status at the moment to go on with learning, or she needs a more complicated question or things like that. But this is again a question: should we use maybe brain data? Did you try that, or would you say we shouldn't try that? Maybe that's something for Daniel or for Vish.
So I could make an app that says it's time to stop, go to sleep. When you wake up, maybe it will have come together. So you do a lot of learning during sleep.
We have those apps, right? Which tell us go to sleep.
Yeah. And you push too hard on this problem, you should take a break. And there's a little bit of science there even that might be able to help make a decision. So on the brain data, I mean, this is going on, of course. Brain data, it's so much data, you just can't resist using AI for it. More simply, the camera can see the size of your pupil and how much it's opening and closing. And that turns out to be a good window onto your learning, right? So it can detect when you're splitting your attention, when you're not thinking as hard as you should be. Now, should the computer then shock you so that you pay more attention? I don't know, but the tracking, it's happening.
I heard of apps that find out that you don't pay attention or that you get tired, and then they offer you a game or something like that. I think this is already happening, but now with brain data and with this new EEG headsets, which are quite cheap and quite okay as far as I heard from their accuracy, you could of course do much more and find out more about the phase people are in.
Yeah, the brain data is going to be bad at telling you. Does this kid know certain kinds of things? It's going to be more global. Are they getting drowsy? Are they paying attention? Are they using their language system? Things like that.
Yeah. There was a great discussion on attention in my filter bubble or in the research I did, especially about this brain EEG data, because there were some headsets in China. They have developed some headsets, and those headsets tell the teacher if students are paying attention. And of course, this was a big outcry of surveillance and things like that. But then we saw that in Germany, researchers as well work on measuring attention via video and image recognition. And then happened what Daniela said right now, that people said, well, maybe attention is not the only thing we need to know, because exactly you need a break. And sometimes it's the best thing not to think about a problem and stop learning and just go for a walk or play some soccer. And then you learn just besides parallel to doing that.
Completely. And this is why again, it's all a data problem, right? Because to say that oh, this person isn't paying attention, therefore it's like a bad thing, right? Like that's like a perfect way to introduce bias into any sort of algorithm, right? Into any model. And because like according to what system is it a bad thing that someone's not paying attention? Like we've created this like arbitrary, to me, arbitrary system of learning where we say, okay, cool, school year is from here to here, and this is when you have to do well in, but like, that's not really how the real world works. And that's not really how like learning happens or anything like that happens. I could use a shock every once in a while, Daniel, but like, that's not really how it should be. There's games out there, like Ring Fit is a really great exercise game for those who like to get swole like me. You play for like 30 minutes or so, and then it tells you like, hey, you've been exercising for a while, maybe time to take a break and come back tomorrow. And so for applications like that, I think it's great, give people a break. And obviously that's based on whatever data and research Nintendo has done. At least I hope so. I haven't actually checked, but with education, it's as both Daniela and Daniel have mentioned, the studies are underway to figure out like, well, can we do similar things with suggestions to people about when it's right to take a break and when it's, maybe time to keep pushing, maybe you're just at a breakthrough. And I think until we have a better picture of what facilitates great learning on the whole, like we think we know things because we've studied them in a particular framework, but there's so much more that we're probably not seeing. And until we implement really rigorous data collection and analysis systems and use techniques like deep learning, but also others, to see what patterns emerge that we can't necessarily pick up on or even think about, we're not really playing in this, we're not really seeing how big the sandbox is that we should be evaluating.
We might find patterns we are not even aware of if we use deep learning on education and learning data. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And there's pitfalls in that as well, but
yes, and we can find some biases and get it totally wrong. But yeah, really interesting. I would like to move on to the Q&A. So there's a question for Daniela from Michael Blank. Regarding data protection, would AI systems be set up differently depending on region, country, due to different data privacy laws? Oh, Daniela, you are muted.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, actually, if you regulate AI, you should do it not nation per nation. Of course, regulation should be internationally, hopefully. So coming from Germany, I prefer a regulation on European level. We saw it concerning the Act for Data Privacy, DSGVO.
GDPR, yeah.
Yeah. That, well, it was discussed widely and in a very, well, concerned manner, but in the end, it helped companies and also people in Europe to have high standard and of data protection, and on the other side, the ability to have business models that work in not only one country, but in several, in 27 countries.
But exactly with GDPR, we found out that, right, that this is a European regulation. And for example, I cannot read all US online magazines and newspapers anymore because they are blocked because they don't comply with GDPR. So I think it's right at the moment. It ends up being differently depending on the location where you are. And we can hope that we can solve this.
Well, actually, yeah, you're right. It's not perfect, of course, but we see also a Brussels effect. So we see that other countries copy this act for their own data. And
San Francisco, for example, as a copy of GDPR. And of course, many US online magazines and newspapers just comply with GDPR because they want their European readers still to read them. Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's great. Then there's a question from Annette to Daniel. In the US, standardized testing plays a big role in selecting students. What is the role of AI in the current testing? What alternatives could AI provide in future selection processes for US universities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing AI can do is it's probably has better fundamental algorithms for ranking people than the current models. So, it could make the testing regime, more accurate, at least on what it's trying to measure. I'm not so excited about that. I think the standardized tests, they have these knockoff effects where people teach to the test and so forth, and people just, the goal is to get the test. It's like my ice cream cone. They just want to do well on the test. So you'd sort of prefer it if AI didn't go that direction, but you could imagine that AI would be able to take a richer space of your performance, maybe go look at Facebook, because Facebook's going to tell a lot about you, and use that. I don't think any college would use that for admissions. Right now, people are getting rid of the standardized tests because they get richer information by letters of recommendation, knowing what school the kid comes from, things like that. But,
so I guess we should hope that nobody uses Facebook data to admit you to a university or.
Right. So that Facebook data is very good. I mean, you can use that to predict who's at risk for suicide quite effectively. Here's a different version of that same problem. So I have a colleague who works for a large corporation, and she is creating platforms, intelligent tutors for the employees to skill up. And now the company wants the data of the students' performance to determine what kind of positions those students should get. And she doesn't want that to happen because she believes that's going to interfere with their learning, right? That they should be able to learn without the sense of it's for performance. So this tension, I think it's going to play out more in industry than in the college level.
Yeah, but as soon as there are data, of course, people want to have it, and you have to decide what's the right use you make out of it. Yeah, great, thanks a lot. That's really interesting. And then we have a question from Reimer Weisbach to everyone. Since AI is finding patterns in data and reinforcing them, would an AI-based teacher be detrimental to fostering creativity? Say more. Tell us more, Daniel.
No, there's actually way back, there was a paper in Science where an AI system actually beat the most creative people in making advertisements. So AI can do creativity. It feels like that violates the mystery of creativity. But certainly AI could figure out these kinds of moves allow people to be more creative. Right. And so it would make space for those moves, and, learning to be creative. There's, it's basically there's a bunch of skills that if you use, you'll be more creative. So AI can do that. It could help you do those skills, which is different than what most people think of as AI is telling you right, wrong, right? It's saying, sorry, it's not 2 + 4 = 6, not 7. And then it gives you 2 + 3. But AI could say, don't use that strategy, use this strategy.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. So I think we have one last question, just because the time is over. I know there are some more. But one last question from Katie again to everyone. How do we ensure that a standardized AI curriculum that emerges through data collection simultaneously encourages the preservation of cultural diversity and diversity of thought instead of further solidifying monolithic viewpoints by way of majority representation via mathematical data models? Who wants to answer? It's for everybody. You can answer or wish. I see you.
I mean, just a quick note. That's a big but wonderful question. I think it comes down to what the intention is behind like the use of AI in education. It's not about like blanket replacing everything. Here you go, AI has now and all the professors have now quit. Like it's not really like that. It's like, how can we like in a stepwise fashion start to find things like kind of the three of us said at the beginning, like how can we start to find ways to double down on the things that make humans more effective in dealing with our juniors, right? Passing on lessons, teaching, etc. And let different models or recommendations or predictions take over in places that they can be really helpful. So for example, Daniel brought up the Facebook and self-harm work. There's also, credit card companies who have lots of great models for predicting fraudulent behavior. There's who else? You know what I mean? Like there's lots of ways to do that. And so, that's a great use of machine learning in education, is to predict like which students are at risk of falling behind. It's not necessarily about replacing a curriculum, although identifying what curricular pieces are helpful and unhelpful and how exactly, right, getting more quantified, getting more precise. That's all really important ways that AI is obviously a broad and probably too all-encompassing term, but machine learning can help for recommendations, and then the help I talked about on the predictive side. So again, it's not really about like just replacing a curriculum, although that could be an outcome that happens through tests.
But again, oh, sorry, Daniel, yeah, please.
I think this is a very profound question. I don't think it's an AI specific question. As you automate things, you could sort of automate them in a way to make them more flexible. But this is a profound question about education, right? Part of education's goal is indoctrination, which is to make everybody indoctrinated along the same lines. At the same time, we want it to respect tremendous range of differences. And so that balance, this is a profound question. I think AI, pushes that question. It brings it to the fore. Right?
Which maybe is good news, right? Because then we have to think about that. Like many challenges AI brings to us, help us to think about ourselves and what we think is important and our values and things like that. So interesting. sadly, the time is running, but luckily we will have some more time in a few minutes at the Sophia space. But I would like to ask a final question to all three of you. And I would like to know if you dream of the future as a teacher. I know two of you work as teachers, at least as well. Daniela, I guess you don't, but maybe you had teachers, or you can imagine you would be a teacher. So what is your dream as a teacher of the future? What would you like to get rid of? Which job that AI can take away from you, and which part of your job would you really like to keep and do it yourself? So who is prepared to start? Daniel, your mic is still open. I think it's you.
Well, I guess there would be two things. You know, just at a, it's kind of a small level. One is nobody likes to grade papers, right? And so AI systems that do automated grading that are kind of smart about it, you know, so that they're not just grading right and wrong. That would be nice. The other thing that I think would be good is if AI could, excuse me, if AI could figure out what's the right next example to give to a student. Because I'll sit there in front of class trying to think of the right example, and I stumble around, and then suddenly my cell phone comes up and says, talk about parades, you know, and I'd be like, yes. So it would be two.
That sounds great. And is there something you really want to keep doing yourself and not give to an AI if it would be possible?
So I do think AI will be able to tell jokes, but I would prefer to have that role.
So, Vish, I think you have to think about something new. But in the meantime, I asked Daniela, who is already unmuted. Thanks a lot,
well,
Daniel.
I did some education, well, in the area of civic education. So,
oh, great.
I always loved is to help people grow and see them grow by give them a feedback and by interact with each other to well, to help the person to grow, to just find out what strength is in the person. So that's something that I always loved. So that is what I would prefer that teachers in the future are still able to have, and there are lots of things that teachers don't like. So there's a lot to do for AI systems to correct work, also write stuff I tell at the moment on whatever. There's a lot of things that I can imagine that could be automized.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks a lot. And see people grow. I think that's an amazing task, and I think this is a reason many people become teachers, because this is something they like, the social part of it. Thanks a lot. And Wish, I think you had time to think about something new, and you can of course still reuse the jokes if you want to.
That's hilarious. No, so I have the gift and the curse of being an ENTJ. And so I see the world in a very black or white way, and which sometimes is good, sometimes mostly is bad. But so my dream for AI and learning is, you know, when I played Halo, I had my like Cortana assistant. When I played, you know, when I use my phone, I don't want to say it because it'll activate it. But I think of a system where any student or any learner really with lifelong learning has an assistant where we can just ask it anything and knows so much about us that we can literally learn anything by just asking it or having it sort of know when we're stuck and help take us to the next level. And so to do that, insane amount of data collection, deep learning, training of agents, reinforcement learning, all of these things very far into the future. That's not going to happen anytime soon, partially because of infrastructure, partially because of data collection and analysis bottlenecks. But that is my dream, to have something where I can literally turn to and say, hey, I want to get to point B. And right now I'm like way back there. Help me to do that, taking into account all the things I need to learn and know along the way.
And what would you like to keep for yourself? Not handing over to an AI?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to have to say it again. I like to tell jokes. So
yeah, that's great. You were the first person to say that. That's totally fine. Daniel was the one who copied that.
No, we're of the same flock.
I really love that both of you like to tell jokes, and I think that's really a great end of the panel. And so we will be meeting in a few minutes in Sophya.ai, but I hand it over to Sophie for some more announcement now. Thank you so much, and see you in a few minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Worlitz. I'm one of the organizers for this event at the German American Conference at Harvard. First, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their incredible and visionary insight about what role AI plays in the future of our education. I don't know about you guys, but with politics and the pandemic dominating the news, this was definitely a necessary break. Now, even though we've run out of time for our panel discussion, our event itself has not come to an end. For anyone interested, we would love for you to join us on the novel platform Sophya.ai to meet people, ask some more questions to our speakers, and just hang out in a more relaxed environment. All you need to do is go to the link which is now posted in the chat in front of you. The important thing is, as mentioned before, is that you do it on a Chrome browser. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to just write us in the chat. Regardless of if you will be joining us for our next part or not, we would love to see you at our next German American Conference event on Friday on the future of migration policy in Europe and the US. You can just visit our website to register for free. So thanks again to both our audience and our speakers. We look forward to seeing you on the Sophia platform.
And I'll just quickly say, when you go into the Sophia link, it'll take you to a green pathway. That's the onboarding. You can just use your arrow keys and run up the path through the door, and feel free to stop and talk to the people you see along the way. They'll help you out.